When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. A Good Friday edition of Football 24/7. Some breaking news, a little Friday news dump from Howie during the Phillies season opener. But John, Eagles finally make the move. They move on from star edge rusher Haason Reddick. I'll kick it right to you. I want your first takeaways. You said some stuff to me before the show that I hadn't thought about. Some interesting stuff. What are your first takeaways from the Eagles sending Reddick to the Jets?
Well, I mean, the Eagles were always going to play a little bit of hardball when it came to moving Haason Reddick. That old joke that an ex-NFL GM told me how he always asked for a second-round pick. It's pretty clear if you looked at the market, L'Jarius Sneed, the deal Tennessee made for him, Brian Burns, the deal, the New York Giants, it was going to be very difficult to get a second-round pick. So how he gets around that goes conditional third-round pick in 2026 that could turn into a second round with a couple conditions. 67.5% of the playing time this upcoming season, and 10 sacks. I think of those two numbers, look, Haason Reddick's one of two players in the NFL to have 10 or more sacks in 4 consecutive seasons, only he and Myles Garrett. So if he's healthy, he's going to get to 10. So the number to keep an eye on is 67.5, which is actually going to be kind of difficult because the Jets, their top edge rusher this year was Jermaine Johnson, about 64, 65. Quinnen Williams was at 68, so just over it, and he's an all-pro. So that's a big number at a rotational position. So that'll be the number to keep an eye on.
Play in Philly? Do you know?
Haason played more than that in Philly last year, and that was part of the problem. Actually, played too much, I think.
Yeah.
Him and Josh Sweat, to be honest. The Jets, even though they lost Bryce Huff, they're still very deep on the defensive line. So that's the number I would focus on more than the 10 or more sacks. And obviously he's not going to get to either if he's not healthy. So he's typically been healthy, played 17 games both year in Philadelphia. Look, he was a great player. But the writing was on the wall here. Once they made the deal, not only Bryce Huff, but the restructured deal with Josh Sweat, it's going to be very difficult to pay 3 edge rushers over $10 million a year. Bottom line is Haason wants over $20 million a year. Some people have said closer to 25. We'll see if the Jets, they haven't worked out a new deal yet. So they're going to have to do that on their end, and that's their problem now. So it was always going to be difficult to pay 3 different guys. And I've compared it to last year with the cornerbacks and the defensive backs with Darius Slay and James Bradbury and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And the Eagles went into free agency, said, well, we can probably keep 2 of 3. And it kept bandying back and forth. At first, it was going to be Slay and C.J. Then it turned into Bradbury and C.J. Then it ended up being Bradbury and Slay. Similar, once they signed Bryce Huff, was sort of like between Josh Sweat and Haason Reddick, and they were able to get something done with Josh Sweat. And Haason Reddick will move on. He had a great 2 years with the Eagles. Don't want to downplay it, but he's going to be 30 in September. So this is the classic, how he's trying to get an ascending player in Bryce Huff to replace him, who's going to be 26 next month. You're paying him at a similar rate. If you think about when Haason signed, it was $15 million a year. You're paying Huff, that's like inflation, $17 million, as opposed to, bottom line, they They didn't want to pay him another long-term contract at 22, 23 million a year. So it's going to be 30 in September. And I get that people are thinking immediacy, but remember, that's not Howie's job. Howie's job
Yeah.
is serve both masters this year and 2025 and even 2026. So if he can pull it off and Bryce Huff is the player that the Eagles think he's going to be, I think you'll be fine. They want Nolan Smith involved more. He's got to take a big step forward. If he does, you're fine. If he doesn't, you're not. But remember, Vic Fangio's here. And what did everybody hate about Haason Reddick last year, which was overblown, how much he dropped in coverage? Well, Vic does that more than anybody who runs his defense. He's got to have his edge defenders. That's where Andrew Van Ginkel had a big season last year in Miami because he can do that. The Eagles brought in Zach Bond. They think he has similar traits. We'll see if he gets into the mix as well. On paper, Haason Reddick would have had to drop into coverage more under Vic Fangio. Maybe this is a Vic Fangio saying, I need somebody who can drop into coverage. And quarter flat defender, that's not Haason Reddick. That's not what he does well.
Yeah, I agree. We'll get into the Vic Fangio part of it. Here's what I don't understand, because I hear everything you say. It all makes sense to me. Howie's obviously not just planning for this year, but how long are Super Bowl windows open in the NFL? I think the Eagles legitimately believe that window is open right now. So let's call it, some people said 20 million. Some people said it was 25 million for Haason. Call it 22.5 to put it in the middle. It's $5.5 million more than Bryce Huff. I think he got worse to save a couple bucks. I don't see the reason from that perspective, especially if you're trying to go and compete for a Super Bowl. And you really just came off the year where your defense wasn't that great. So what do you make of that?
Well, it wasn't that great, and that's part of the reason as a whole, and it's certainly not Hassan's fault that it wasn't great, but he was also a part of it, and it still wasn't great. And he didn't have as good as a year, let's be honest, as he had in 2022 when he was fourth in Defensive Player of the Year voting. He was second-team All-Pro. He had 19 and a half sacks if you count the playoffs. He was phenomenal in 2022. Wasn't as good as 2023. And why? Look, they weren't ahead. You know, what does he do best? You're winning games. You let him pin his ears back, and he looks great. If he's got to be in run support, if he's got to be in coverage, not as great. So maybe that factors in again from the Vic Fangio side of it. You're trying to get the group better. And you say, well, you know, roster building is a science, right? They want Nolan Smith involved. Now, people can dismiss that, but they picked him in the first round for a reason. We'll see how he comes back. I think he's got to add weight and strength. What's he doing in the offseason? That will ultimately be told. Look, you have Bryce Huff. You paid him $17 million. That, again, it's an evaluation. If he's wrong, it's going to look bad.
Right.
If he's right, it's going to look great because he's 26 years old. And if you sign Haason Reddick to a 3-year extension and give him $50 million of guarantees, what's he going to be at 32? Is he going to be the same player? Probably not. So now you have a 25-year-old who's going to turn 26 in April. He might be good 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's sort of what you're trying to do as a GM. And then, as I said, the sweat part, they actually got him to take less money to save. Brandon's still going to be here for a year. You know, that factors into it. Again, Nolan Smith and the Zach Bond part of it, which is evidently a big part to Vic because he believes he's got the Andrew Van Ginkel traits to be a rusher, but also be a coverage player that Haason Reddick probably doesn't have from the coverage aspect.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I would imagine the Jets are trying to work on a new deal with Haason. It'll be interesting to see how what that deal looks like. Because I agree with you. 3 years, that might be a little steep for a guy that's, nearly on the other side of 30. 2 years, I'd probably rather go the Haason route. John, what do you think? How confident are you in Bryce Huff's ability to step in? You talked about dropping into coverage. Fangio does that a lot. You now have Brandon Graham, you have Nolan Smith, you have Josh Sweat, and you have Bryce Huff. Are
And
they
Zach
going to be
Bond,
able,
put him in
and
there
Zach Bond,
too.
right? Are they going to be able to get the
You
job
know,
done? Is it going to be an
yeah.
improved defensive ends?
Well, I
Is that
think they're
be,
going to be improved defensively. I mean, it's going to be hard not to be improved defensively because they're going to get better at linebacker. They're going to get better in the secondary as well. Is it going to be better because Haason Reddick's not here? No. But is the sum of the parts going to be better? Yeah, it's going to be better because of the coordinator. It's going to be better because of the additions up front, the additions at all three levels. So it kind of depends how you look at it. It's this whole mosaic. If you're paying Haason Reddick, if you just say roll over, pet my belly, take 25 million, well, then you're probably not getting some of these other players you've gotten. So it all fits together. It's not just about one move in a vacuum. I get the fact that people love the guys from Philadelphia. He's overachieved here from even what was expected. He single-handedly wrecked the NFC Championship game.
yeah, I mean, 27 sacks in 2 years. I mean, he's been tremendous player. He's proven. Bryce
He's
Huff is
been
not proven.
he's
That's my
been
biggest problem with it. Going into a Super Bowl window type of year, you took a proven player, you moved on from him, and you're making a projection, which you're right is technically Howie's job. He's not wrong in that sense. But if you're trying to go for the Super Bowl, I just don't see why you would take a step back at such a key position.
well, I mean, if you're playing devil's advocate, and I'll do it since I'm the unpopular one, I'll play, he had 19 and a half sacks in 2022, and he already took a big step back from that last year. He was not the same player. Wasn't all his fault. But he was clearly not second team all pro. He was clearly and didn't deserve to be second team all pro. He certainly didn't deserve to be fourth in defensive player of the year balloting. So you can make a statement that he was a descending player, maybe hit his crescendo. And you're not paying a guy in theory for what he did. You're paying a guy for what he's going to do.
Makes sense.
And if they think he's a descending player, and to be honest, they clearly do, because if they didn't, why all the angst? And part of that, there's a lot of hypocrisy with the Eagles, but every individual decision isn't the same because, they went out and got Saquon Barkley, who in theory is a descending player, and they gave him money. And they looked at Haason Reddick in probably one number, which is 30, and said, oh, we can't pay him. Well, Saquon's 27, but he's also touched the football because of his status on the New York Giants, like a 31-year-old when it comes to touches and how many he's assembled. And they kind of glossed over that. So there's a little bit of contradiction and hypocrisy, but the bottom line is they think he's a descending player and don't want to pay him 20, 21, certainly not $25 million. And you get a 26-year-old for 17. If it works, that's a home run. But if it doesn't work,
yeah, I mean,
and by the way, the Jets have arguably the most talented defense in football.
Yeah, they have a tremendous defense.
So he's going to look good with the Jets again. He's got Quinnen Williams to work off of.
Right.
And, they have even though they lost Bryce Huff, they still have Jermaine Johnson, John Franklin.
They got good quarterbacks. Their whole defense is built out.
Yeah, it's great. Arguably the most talented defense. So he's going to play well. This is definitely a gamble. Because he's going to have a better, as funny as it sounds, he's going to have a better, because people think the Eagles are a contender. He's going to have a better supporting cast on the defensive side with the Jets than he would have had here.
Yeah, I agree. John, did Joe Douglas get the better of Howie here? I mean, if you take it
No,
based
I
on
don't
what you
think
said,
that.
though,
No.
The Jets are all in though. I mean, they have a different
Well, they have to
circumstance.
be
They have an
because
old quarterback, right?
and
Aaron Rodgers has 1 or 2 years left, but they got
and
better.
this is the part where, and I get it, because fans want to win right now. They don't care about 2026. But in 2026, the Jets are probably going to stink because even if you get 2 years out of Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be gone by 2026. And unless they have a succession plan, all of a sudden that third round pick is going to be at the top of the third round. If it returns in the second round, it's going to be at the top of the second round. And all of a sudden you're going to be loving life having that kind of pick for a player who, by the way, is probably used up by that point as well, Haason Reddick.
Yeah, I mean, if the
This,
Eagles suck and we can't get out of the first round though the next 2 years, I don't care if we have a second round pick in
yeah,
2026.
most GMs think future picks aren't worth as much as current picks. In other words, a third round pick in 2026 is not worth as much as a third round pick in
Right.
25 or 24. But the reason they think that is because they don't have job security. Howie sees it as a market inefficiency. It's a big term this week with the Eagles. He sees it as a market inefficiency because he knows he's going to be here. So it's going to be valuable to him. Whereas Joe Douglas looks at it the opposite direction. He's not going to be there. So it doesn't mean anything to him. And he's willing to gamble. And that's where Jeffrey Lurie comes into this, and that consistency, and he's allowed to be patient where other GMs are not allowed to be patient,
Right,
and
because
he
their
takes
jobs are on the
advantage
line.
of that all the time. All the time he takes advantage of that.
John, any other moves you see happening? And this is not including the NFL draft. We'll talk about that at the end here. Any other moves you see happening on defense? And I'm not sure if you know these numbers yet. What did this do for the cap? Does this free up 14 million, or
No,
is there
no.
some sort of I was going to say I didn't think so, but
Another Jeffrey Lurie, a lot of dead money. Let's see, get you the exact numbers. They will gain a very minimal amount under the cap, 1.312 million. So just over 1.3 million. They do take on about 20 and a half million of dead money, but that's money already spent. And that's money Jeffrey Lurie's already outlaid. So a minimal cap bump up in a positive direction, but not much.
so
Where it's
nothing
going to mean
significant. You couldn't, there wouldn't be a move that could, we were on, we were on we had Dan Silio show until 6, and when the trade broke, and some people were speculating maybe how he's gearing up to go trade for Patrick Surtain. Not, that's just hypothetical, but somebody of that caliber. It doesn't really
well,
seem like this made
once
that
that
possible.
I don't know why, and Denver's a mess. I keep hearing the Surtain. I don't know why Denver would trade him. I don't know. I mean, I don't cover the team on a
Maybe
daily
the
basis.
$85 million of dead cap they're eating on Russell would have something to do with it.
Well, that's not going to help them with that. That money's already spent. I mean,
Right.
when you talk about dead money, it's already spent. It's already outlaid. You're not gaining anything back by moving on from players or doing anything that from a cap standpoint. That's just an owner willing to take on that kind of hit. And obviously, Denver was brought by very rich people, so they're willing to do that. I remember when Carson Wentz's dead money was the record. Now that's been lapped time and time again because these owners are willing to spend this money. But yeah, I mean, Denver's a mess, as I said. They got to work out their quarterback situation. But generally, when you have good young players on a rookie deal, you don't want to trade them. I don't know why they would trade them. Unless he's creating waves. But I do think the Eagles want to get better, obviously, in the secondary, and that includes certainly the cornerback position. And James Bradbury, to me, is sort of here as a safety net still in case they can't get better, whether that's in the draft, drafting someone, or whether it's on the trade market. But with Patrick Surtain, I don't know. Denver would have to be really, really dumb to trade that type of player.
Speaking of the NFL draft, do you think this alters what they might do, specifically in round one? Is a guy like Chop Robinson available? I mean, I think they're going to go offensive line. That that's seems
Well,
to be their
I
MO,
think
and they're deep there. So
I
the
think
draft is deep there.
I think there's a possibility. He's done it in the past, recently, especially with Devontae Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter last year. You have these targeted trades up, but not big moves, just slight moves up. Two or one. And last year was one spot, two spots in Devontae's case. Jordan was two spots as well. If somebody like Quinyon Mitchell starts to fall a little bit, I could see him, Howie trying to targeted trade up there. But if you have to stay at 22, I lean towards offensive line as well because there's so many of them.
Yeah,
And
it's really deep, the draft with offensive linemen.
yeah, especially at the top. So one of them's going to trickle down. You're going to get good value at that particular position. And that's what the Eagles value. But yeah, this will put edge rusher. But I mean, how many edge rushers do you need?
Yeah,
It's not like you're going to bench Bryce Huff. I get people are concerned. They don't believe in Bryce Huff. Well, I got news for you. They paid him $17 million. So he's playing. So
forget
you better
Bryce
hope.
Huff. I don't believe in Nolan Smith. That's
If you don't believe in Nolan Smith, I got news for you. He was the 30th pick last year. He's playing. So
that's what I'm saying. They
hope,
spent all this stuff led up to Haason. They drafted Nolan Smith, then they go and sign, a replica of him and Bryce Huff, and then they push the bonus back. We all knew this was coming,
Yeah, and in fact, I said it this morning. I was starting to think maybe there's some room that a Haason accepts 18, 19 million. Maybe they can work something out for 1 year, let him play out his contract and it could go that way. But it was really small. You started to think maybe that could happen. But from all indications, yeah, he wants well over 20 million. He wasn't moving off that stance, and that wasn't gonna work for the Eagles. But the one thing, they were not going to cut him. There were some people who said, well, they'll have to cut him. That was never going to happen. They will be stubborn and they will hold on to somebody like they did with Zach Ertz. For a long period of time, they were able to get something done with the Jets. And, the Jets were in on Jadeveon Clowney, lost out on him. And then they had to pivot and ironically, it turns out to be a trade. So you get Bryce Huff and a future third round pick for Haason Reddick. You get younger, you get more cost effective, and you get a premium pick that might be a second round pick by the time it rolls around. It's not bad.
I like it for the future, but I mean, and we've talked about this on Bird 365 all the time. Most NFL contracts have a team option after 2 years. I mean, here's a hypothetical from somebody in the chat, Paul Mancini. Thanks for checking in. Reddick will get 2 years, $44 million. Let's just say that was what it would be. I'm going Haason all day. I really am. I don't.
Well, I get it where because he's played so well, but man, it wasn't great last year.
Well, he started with the hand problem, and he picked up a little bit after that, but yeah, he wasn't the same player last year.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can give me the 2022, 2023 Haason Reddick, I can agree.
Jonathan Gannon, we need your back.
Yeah. How funny is that?
Yeah. Right.
If you can give me that version of Reddick, I agree. Give me the NFC Championship version. I agree. That's not what I saw last year. I'm sure that's what the Eagles are thinking. And why are you going to go up to 22 million for a player that you think is descending when you can pay 17 for a player you think is ascending?
Well,
everything's about
you're betting on hope with Bryce, but I see what you're saying. If you evaluate that Reddick is descending, you're not going to give him that contract. I agree.
Yeah, everything's about evaluation in this league. So that's what you believe. and I'm not talking about you.
Right.
I'm not talking about me. The Eagles believe Bryce Huff is ascending, and they believe Haason Reddick is descending. And ultimately, they're going to have a tough time selling that next year because I think Hassan's going to have a big year on that Jets
I
defense.
do too. I think he has a chance to have a career year.
Well, I don't know if he's ever having a year like he had in 2022. I mean,
They got competent defensive coaches over there too.
Yeah, they have a great defense. 19 and a half sacks, though, in 19 games. I mean, that's pretty good. I don't think it's ever getting better than that. The Eagles certainly agree with it. And then there's the Philadelphia part of it. He's a South Jersey kid, went to Temple, obviously. But that kind of stuff. Jody and I were talking about this morning. I mean, that's so overrated. Look at last year. Haason Reddick, he's gone. DeAndre Swift, who cares? St. Joe's Prep, Olamide Zacchaeus.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
Yeah. I mean, Philadelphia, all right. It's a great story, but guys are going to go where they're wanted and who gives them the most money. And yeah, I mean, when you're 10, that's cool, but when you're an adult,
I just want you to help us win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. I hated the Boston Celtics when I was young. If they paid me the most money, I'd be wearing Celtic gear all day.
Yeah, put it all over me, that green. John, I'm going to ask you to do something you don't normally do. I want you to grade this, but I want you to grade it in two ways. Because you like this move a lot more than I do. And really, it seems like a lot of the Philadelphia fans who you just talked about. Grade it for now. And I say now, I mean the 2024 season that we're about to look at. And grade it for the future in 2026 when that pick might come and it might be a high second round pick.
It's a lateral move immediately, or even worse. But yeah, in 2026, it's going to look much better, because I do think Bryce Huff is going to be a good player, and I do think by that point, I think the Jets are going to be bad because Aaron Rodgers is going to move on. I think Haason will probably be, pretty much at best a clearly descending player at that point. And then it's going to look better, and that's, Howie doesn't have to worry about losing his job because Haason Reddick has a better year than Bryce Huff in 2024. He doesn't have to worry about that. So that's a luxury he has and he uses. So people are saying, you're never getting a second round pick. And I was saying that when I saw the Snead trade. And I was saying that when I saw the Burns trade. And Howie's up there sitting there and saying, oh, yeah, wait. Yeah, it might not be now, but he might get that second round pick in 2026 because he can take advantage of that market inefficiency that other people can't. And that's
is the conditional based on just this upcoming season?
Yeah.
For example,
which is, again, smart from Howie's perspective because he knows Haason Reddick's going into a very good defense. Yep. He knows guys had 10 sacks 4 consecutive years. As long as he's healthy, he's getting 10 sacks with that defense. And it all obviously comes down to health. Same with the playing time. But the playing time aspect of it is trickier because they are so deep on the front and they rotate so much and they still have those guys. Johnson, they didn't even play. Will McDonald was the 15th pick in the draft. John Franklin Myers. They got a bunch of really good players. And to get to that 67.5% number, that's going to be the more difficult part of it.
Yeah. I don't see it, John. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I don't like the move. I think they got worse in a year where they needed to go and get better on defense. But I do see the future. I mean, the future.
Well, I'll turn it back on you. Do you think the Eagles are going to be better on defense in 2024 or worse on defense? Not Haason Reddick versus Bryce Huff. The Eagles defense in 2024 versus the Eagles defense in 2023. That's an easiest bet in the world.
I don't know if it is, John. It's all projection. You need Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis to fill Fletcher Cox's shoes. Now you lost Haason Reddick. I mean, you added Gardner Johnson, which is good. You added Zach Bond. You added Bryce Huff. I don't think the defense got that much better. Now maybe if Fangio can be better,
Vic is going to roll out the footballs and be better than that group last year. Yeah, I mean.
That's a lot of high hope on Vic Fangio. I mean, I know he's still got a lot of history in this league, but
yeah, they're going to be done
that much.
They're going to be better. They're going to be better. James Bradbury's going to be better. Even if he might not even be.
I do think Bradbury will be better because Fangio will use him more.
He will use him correctly. CJ's back. I'm not a big Devin White fan. Hopefully Nakobe can play, but they'll add another linebacker in the draft. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Carter's going to be a star. He's only going to get better. Jordan Davis is good for what he does. It's just that people don't understand what he does. They want him to rush the passer. Right. That's not what he does. He's there to take up blockers and create so others can make plays, and he does a very good job, and he's only going to get better.
Has to be better at that. I mean, what you just said, forget wanting him to rush the passer. Even if that's his role, he still has to be better at that, and he has to do it for the full season.
And he will, the conditioning part of it is a big deal with the Georgia guys. I agree with that. They gotta play more, and they gotta play more effectively late in the season. But Jordan Davis was, I don't know. I'm looking him up on PFF. He was like a 30th in the league. There's 32 teams. That means there's 64 starting interior, more than that if you look at certain schemes. He's 30th. That's pretty good. Does he need to get better? Yes, he needs to get better. And he will continue to get better. But I do think a lot of people don't understand his role. I think Josh Sweat's going to be better because of the presence of Vic Fangio. I think Bryce Huff is going to be solid. I think Nolan Smith is going to be better because he's got to be better. He can't be worse. If Nakobe stays healthy.
This is a lot of projection, John, for a team that just got burnt by Baker Mayfield.
By the way, it's about how bad they were last year. I'm not saying they're going to be.
It's inevitable that they're going to get better because of how bad they were.
Exactly. It's not even about how good they're going to be, although, they're going to be top half of the league. I said the same thing about Brian Flores when he went to Minnesota, and they were like the worst defense. They were one of the worst defenses I ever saw. And I told Jody on the show, they're going to be top half of the league. Just because of Flores, and they were. Damn it if they weren't, and they had no talent whatsoever. And I say the same thing with Vic. I don't think the Eagles defense is going to be great, but they're going to be top half of the league. They're going to be 16th or below and ranked in defense. Just because
John, if you're right on this, I don't want to see Sean Desai as a specialist in this league. If you're right on this.
Well, I mean, look at Miami's defense last year. But they ended up whatever they were, 10th, 11th, somewhere in that range. Not phenomenal, but I mean, it's what he does. He's been doing it for a long time. And they'll be better coached. You won't see as many mistakes. They'll understand how to do what they're being asked to do better. It's going to be a better defense because it has to be better defense because that's how bad the group was last year.
It's going to be better because there's no more room to go lower.
Pretty much. At the bottom. Certainly on third downs in situational football, there's literally nowhere else to go but up.
Yeah. All right, Johnny Mac. We'll see how it all plays out. I'm already ready for Birds 365 on Monday morning to hear Jody, who is a lifelong Jets fan. I can't wait to hear what he says about this. He hasn't been too high on the Bryce Huff move. Now, we basically moved. You could basically say the Eagles traded Haason Reddick to the Jets for Bryce Huff and a conditional third-round pick.
Yeah, and they got younger and cheaper, and more
Did
cost
they get
effective.
better though? Did they get better? They
Well,
got younger and cheaper,
for
but
for
did they get
for
better?
for whatever reason, look at Bryce Huff. A lot of people in Philadelphia seem to think that Bryce Huff can't play. Now, I'm going to say the vast majority of them haven't seen him play. And ironically, the one time they should have seen him play was against the Eagles, where he destroyed the Eagles, by the way. If he can't play, yeah, it's a bad decision. They're paying him $17 million for a reason. They think he can play. If they're wrong, yeah, it's going to blow up in their face.
I think he can play. I just don't know if he can play to the tune of 27 sacks in 2 years and the anchor edge rusher on the team. I hope he can, but when you're in a Super Bowl window and you paid your quarterback $50 million and you have AJ and Devontae and Dallas and you just signed Saquon Barkley, like, I'm in all systems go mode. And I don't know if this move doesn't really signify that to me, which is what I don't like about it. But I do think there's merit to what you're saying in terms of they got younger, they got cheaper. From a GM's perspective, it's a good move.
Yeah, I think, and everything is about evaluation at the end of the day. Do you get the player right or do you get the player wrong? When they signed Haason Reddick, they got him right. When they got rid of him, let's see if they get it right. If they sign Bryce Huff, we'll see if they get it right. If they don't, yeah, they're in trouble because I don't think they have. If it's not Bryce Huff, I don't think they have a guy who can offer the type of consistent pass rush that Haason Reddick did over the past 2 seasons. It's got to be Bryce Huff because it's not going to be Nolan Smith. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. All right, John, we'll see how it all shakes out. And for the Philly fans watching, we better hope that this defense can pan out like John just explained that it would. So we'll see how it all plays out. John, any closing thoughts you have on the trade?
Yeah, it was a fait accompli. It was coming, once they agreed to rework Josh Sweat, it was sort of, we're going to keep 2 and we're not going to keep 3. And once they worked things out with Josh Sweat, it was pretty clear Haason was going to go. It was just a matter of when. Again, there was some hope at the end. Well, maybe if he takes $18 million, because he wasn't going to play less than what Bryce Huff got. Maybe if he takes $18 million for a year, you can, as you say, keep that Super Bowl window, keep everybody back, and then Nolan Smith is pissed off, and everybody else is pissed off.
Nolan Smith's got to earn it, man. I don't care if you're pissed off. Haason Reddick, I get it. 27 sacks, 2 years, underpaid, getting paid less than Bryce Huff. I get it. Nolan Smith, you better sit your ass down until you do something in the league.
Well, I agree with that part of it. He has no right to say anything. But my point is, you can't just. I think people overlook the human aspect of it. That people are people, and that they have personalities, and they get upset. Yeah, and if things don't, and you can't just add a bunch of people. Like I've talked about it before, and Nick Sirianni talked about it at the owners' meetings. And he said it's a good problem to have. But when anybody says about getting the football to AJ, Devontae, Dallas, Saquon, it's a good problem to have. When anybody says that, the word problem is in it.
Yeah.
And the word problem is in it because it's a freaking problem. And good players want the football. So it's easy to say, pull up Madden and say, I'm going to get this guy and I'm going to get. And then we got people saying, well, the Eagles should take a wide receiver at 22 and get somebody there, get that third receiver.
It's I am not on that boat. Yeah.
I mean, there's a science to roster building. And when you have Bryce Huff and you have Josh Sweat in the fold and you have Nolan Smith and you have Brandon Graham and he signs Zach Bond, do you really need 6 edge rushers? People say they can't find a 4th. They haven't been able to find a 4th. Right now, they got 5.
Yeah, that's why I brought up Patrick Surtain or something to put a bandage on the wound. I don't think we need another edge rusher, but I do think we need more pieces on the defense.
And then the injury part of it. Look, you can't legislate injuries. You can't say, oh, if so and so's injured, yeah, it'd be great to have an all-pro to take off the bench. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well, that I agree with. All right, Johnny Mac, good Friday, Easter weekend, brother. I hope you have a good weekend. Thank you for doing this with me, and a quick reaction to a big trade. I know we were all waiting for it, but still it sucks when it hits. I think most fans are upset about it. I'm upset about it. You made me feel a little better, but not too much. You didn't win me over, John, and you normally do. But have a good weekend, my friend. Thanks for doing it, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to like the show on your way out and subscribe to JAKIB Sports. We'll be covering all the Eagles moves, all the draft talk, and all the offseason things leading into the next season. Thank you, Johnny Mac.
Thanks, Ander.
See you all Monday.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.